Hi everyone, my name is Holly and welcome back to your monthly new releases video. Oh boy, so I feel like I should apologize in advance because I have 25 books on my list for October. Get your Goodreads up, pen and paper out, your TBRs are sweating. I can literally hear mine screaming right now. So let's jump straight into it. Starting on the first, we only have 2 books releasing here on my list, and the first one is God of Night by Tom Lloyd. I'm personally a big fan of Tom Lloyd. I read and really enjoyed Stranger of Tempest, and the sequel to that book. It's a very classic sword and sorcery kind of plot following a group of mercenaries in a fantasy world. So I'm very much looking forward to his new book, which I actually had no idea about until I was researching for this video. This is, I believe, the conclusion to a series, even though I think you can jump into some of the books without having started Stranger of Tempest. I don't recommend it, but if you're a sinner, that's an option. If you like Dungeons and Dragons with a bunch of eccentric drunk characters trying to accomplish a mission, I recommend this one. And the second book coming out on October 1st is Dark Art by Steve Feasey. This is the sequel to Dark Blade, which I was highly anticipating last year, but I never got the chance to read it. So with the sequel coming out, it's a great time to pick it up. I'm really hoping it goes on sale on the Kindle store eventually. It's yet another sword and sorcery story. It's supposed to be very traditional, following Lanigan, who was a farm boy, but instead of working the land, he likes to work his brain instead by reading books. Well, tragedy strikes when someone in his life is struck down by a monster, and everything changes from there. I believe this is a YA fantasy, so if you're looking for an easier fantasy to get into this fall, then the series might be the one. Moving on to October 6th, we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. You probably saw this coming. I have actually never read a book by V.E. Schwab, and I'm planning for this one to be my first. I don't know if that's a mistake or not. You can tell me down below. This author is incredibly beloved. I think she's a super cool person, but her books are just really intimidating to me because of how hyped they all are. And honestly, I've never really been enticed by them until this one. So in this book, we are following Adeline, who is a spirited girl living in a small village in 1714 France, and all she wants to do is see the world. When she is forced into a marriage, she makes a deal with a god. She'll be able to live a long, untethered life, but she will be forgotten by everyone she meets. That is such a fairy tale plotline. I can't stand how cool it sounds. I'm really excited for this one. Tell me down below if it's a good first V. Schwab book to start with. Up next is The Ministry for the Future by Kim Stanley Robinson. I'm very thankful to Orbit Books for sending this over to me. It is a far bigger book than I thought. It is beastly. It's a near future novel that is an exploration of climate change, technology, politics, and the human behaviors that drive these forces. It sounds extremely non-fiction, but it's actually a sci-fi / non-action thriller with a very realistic view. So it is the year 2025. That is not far away at all. A new worldwide agency called the Ministry for the Future has been created to look after world issues and ensure that there is a future for humanity. Suddenly there is a massive heat wave in India and millions die. I feel like my fantasy brain is not going to be able to compute anything that is inside this book, but boy am I willing to try. I think it's going to be a very important story, and what a freaking time to release it with how the world is today. Also on the 6th, we have Return of the Thief by Megan Wallen Turner. I cannot believe I can finally mention this book in a new releases video. As the title of the book says, this is the return to the world of the Queen's Thief series, 20 freaking years in the making. Honestly, if you're looking for a series where all the books are short, easy to read, and to get through, especially the first book, it reads incredibly simple, but they progressively get more complicated in a good way. I recommend this series, and with the finale releasing, perfect timing. I mean, what else is there to say? The thief is back. About freaking time. Over the Woodward Wall by A. Deborah Baker. You guys have no idea how many times it took me to say that.
Over the Woodward Wall by Over the Woodward Wall by A. Over the Woodward.
AKA Shannon McGuire. So if you're a fan of Middle Game, then you should be excited about this one. This is a story that was in that book, and Tor is publishing it as its own novella. It's a fairy tale about 2 very different children who find themselves one ordinary morning on an adventure. I've never read Middle Game. It wasn't a book I was interested in, but I believe that you can read this as its own story. It is considered a companion, but the cover is just too freaking cool. I might just read it anyways. Also on the 6th, we have the Tower of Nero by Rick Riordan. I'll be honest, I've just been waiting for the series to end so I can binge them, because Riordan likes to end his books on huge cliffhangers, and we are not about that life. This is the final book in the Trials of Apollo series. It's a series that takes place 6 months after Blood of Olympus, and it's following Apollo, who is punished by his dad Zeus and has to live his life like a mortal boy in the streets of New York. Honestly, I'm going to leave it at that because you're probably going to see a lot of booktubers get sponsored to talk about it, so there you go. And then we have We Were Restless Things. This is coming from a debut author. It's a atmospheric contemporary fantasy about 3 teens coming of age in the wake of a mysterious death, so it's a bit of a mystery thriller. It's supposed to be written in a very interesting way. It's in third person and every chapter is the perspective of a different character. It's blending reality and supernatural, and it sounds like a good book to read around Halloween. And then we have Blaze Wrath Games. This is a YA fantasy about dragons. So much, in fact, it's being compared to How to Train Your Dragon meets Quidditch Through the Ages. It's a debut fantasy set in an alternate contemporary world in which dragons and their riders compete in a international sports tournament. We're following Lena, who has always dreamed of participating in the Blaze Wrath Games. When her chance to interview for the Puerto Rican team comes, she joins the team and starts training for the epic games. This one just sounds really fun. Plain entertainment, competition, dragons, sounds really action-packed as well. The Lost Tale of Sir Lancelot by David Michael Williams. Okay, so this one sounds really great, but I cannot find it on Amazon. I can't find it on Goodreads. Unless it pops up after this video is live, it doesn't freaking exist. And it's making me really sad because this cover is just freaking great. It's like modern medieval times. I love it. Also, I never do this, but please just let me read you what it says on the author's website. So it says, Wizards and Wannabes. As the first day of high school creeps closer, 5 friends agree to one last LARP, which means live action role-playing, before splitting the party and ending their geeky game forever. But the real adventure is just beginning. Mistaking the teens' costumed characters for actual warriors, a sorceress summons Sir Lancelot, Elvis Presley, Brutus the Bullheaded, Master Prospero, and tomfoolery to her world. To complete an impossible quest, to succeed, they must become the heroes they only ever pretended to be. And if they can't find a way to win, it's game over for real. Like, I obviously need to read this. Okay, moving on, we have The Lives of Saints by Leigh Bardugo. So if The Language of Thorns is anything to go by, this is going to be awesome. This is a beautiful, full-colored, illustrated edition of stories within the Shadow and Bone trilogy and beyond. As someone who prefers Shadow and Bone over Six of Crows, Six of Crows was really disappointing to me. I'm pretty excited about this one. Oh, the illustrations are done by Daniel Zollinger, and his artwork is stunning. Finally, moving on to October 13th, we have Lightbringer by Claire Legrand. This is the 3rd and final book within the ever so popular Imperium trilogy. The first one being Furyborn. I always hear fans of this series say that people are sleeping on it, but it's funny because I hear about the series constantly, especially when Furyborn came out, so I really wanted to mention this finale in case you're a fan and didn't realize it's coming out soon. It's a YA fantasy following 2 women. They are both queens in their own way and in their own time. So yes, we have Raelle, who is the past, and then Alina, who is the present, which I think is a really cool concept. I own both books, 1 and 2, so I mean, it's an option for me. And then we have The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk. This is a high fantasy novel which focuses on 2 main protagonists and a cool magic system. One of those characters is a sorceress who dreams of becoming a full-fledged magus. It has Regency romance, which isn't my thing, but it might be some of your guys' buzzwords. It also has ladies fighting for their rights and witchcraft. It's a feminism story that might have an impact, and I think it's worth mentioning. Black Sun. This is a really really exciting first book to a new trilogy called Between Earth and Sky. It is adult and it's inspired by the civilizations of the pre-Columbian Americas and woven into a tale of celestial prophecies, political intrigue, and forbidden magic. It does have a hint of sci-fi to it, which makes sense since this author wrote a Star Wars book, so I expect it to be very complex and action-packed to hell. And then we have a Golden Fury. This is a pretty hyped YA fantasy / historical fiction, I feel like. It's coming from a debut author. It's mostly following Thea, and she and her mother are alchemists, but just before they've completed the Philosopher's Stone, her mother locks her out of their lab and goes mad. Thea is then sent back to England to a father who doesn't even know that she exists. It promises an adventure-filled story with romance and danger, and it releases on the 13th. Beyond the Ruby Veil is next, yet another YA fantasy. Publishers are pumping those out like crazy. This is a dark and queer fantasy, to be specific, that's perfect for fans of the Three Dark Crowns series and the Wicked Saints. So after our main character, Emmanuelle, kills the one person in her city who can create water, she must find a way to save her city from dying of thirst. This plot, man, sounds so compelling to me, and it's definitely a book I'm going to be keeping my eye on. Up next is Winter, White, and Wicked. This is a book I almost decided to read at one point, but I got distracted by something else. I love books that are set in the snow, so maybe I'll read it around winter time. This is supposed to be Mad Max Fury Road meets Frozen, in a YA fantasy about a rig driver's journey to save her friend. It's set in a world where winter is eternal. It's following trucker Sylvie, who accepts a job from a famous smuggler in order to get to her friend who has run away to join a rebellion. It just sounds so interesting. I've never read a book that follows a big rig driver. And it's a fantasy too, so like I'm totally here for it. And then we have White Trash Warlock by David Slayton. It's literally on my list because of the freaking title. It's an urban fantasy following Adam Binder, who has the sight. It's a power that runs in his bloodline. It gives him the ability to see beyond his world and into another, a realm of magic populated by elves, gnomes, and spirits of every kind. But for much of Adam's life, that power has been a curse. This is supposed to have a gay romance and an evil entity that must be destroyed to save the world. It's a very interesting sounding story for sure. The Resin Shard by D.K. Holmberg. This is the first book to a fantasy series called The Chainbreaker. It's about an assassin with no rival who meets a magic he cannot defeat. It's following Gavin, who was trained to kill from a very young age, and he's finally escaped that life when suddenly an old friend has invited him into the city where the work there is plentiful. Suddenly an enemy arises. I'm excited for this one mainly because the synopsis mentions a tavern called the Roasted Dragon. I'm a basic bitch, what can I say? Finally, we are moving on to a new date, October 15th. The Once and Future Witches by Alex D. Haro releases on that day, and I'm currently reading this one. It's set in the late 1800s where three sisters use witchcraft to change the course of history. They've been separated for 7 years, and at the very beginning they find each other and this huge mystery unfolds. I'm enjoying it. I'm still at the very beginning, but it's very different from the 10,000 Doors of January, so we'll see if it holds up to that one. Moving on to October 20th, we have Ruby by Nina Allen. This is a collection of short stories that revolve around Ruby Castle, who is a film actress. I really don't know anything else about this book. The genres say speculative, fantasy, and horror, which is fun, but honestly, I just wanted to mention this one because the cover is really enticing to me. The red paneling with this older style green dress, it's so cool, and it's on my radar just for that. On October 27th, we have a few books coming out that day. The Tower of Fools is coming, which is one of my most anticipated books of the year, actually. It's a brand new trilogy from the author of the legendary Witcher series. Well, it's not brand new. It was translated and is being re-released. It's supposed to be more of a historical-based fiction with a bit of sarcasm involved. It's set in Central Europe circa 15th century, where the magic and myth unfold against a backdrop of a church struggling to suppress growing heresies. I'm excited for it. We'll see how it holds up after, 20 years of its actual release date, which is crazy to think about, but I mean, we'll see. I really want to do a Should You Read It episode for this one, so tell me down below if you want to see that. And then we have Northern Wrath. This is a Norse mythology based fantasy, if you couldn't tell by the axe. It exudes Viking culture to the core and promises a ton of action. This is set in the 10th century during what is often considered to be the golden age of Vikings. Northern Wrath is a tale of revenge and consequence. As the Norse people continue to expand, their connection to the old gods fade. This is supporting a very large cast of characters, so hopefully this debut author can capture each of them in this very rich sounding story. 2 more books left, and the second to last one is Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco. This is yet another highly anticipated book within the YA book community. I've read Stalking Jack the Ripper by this author, but I didn't like it, but I'd love to give this one a try. The story begins with a family in Sicily that runs a popular restaurant called the Sea and Vine. Interesting. The thing that makes this family very different, though, is that the twins are witches that live secretly among humans. They have been told ever since they were little girls to always wear their amulets and to beware the Malvagi. This sounds deliciously wicked, as the title suggests, and a great fall read. And the last book here is Magic, Dark, and Strange. This is a really short book that I just wanted to quickly throw on this list. It's supposed to be the Bone Witch meets Sherlock Holmes in a historical fantasy about a girl with the ability to raise the dead who must delve into her city's dangerous magical underworld to stop a series of murders. I think it sounds really cool. Another great fall read, and I just really love the cover with the graveyard in the background. So there you have it, 25 books that release in October. Yes, there are so many more, but that is all the time I have for. Tell me in the comments which book that you're most excited about, maybe a book I missed, and if you found a book that you didn't know about, liking the video really helps me out a lot. Go ahead and subscribe. I upload videos every single week. Follow me on Instagram at HollyHeartsBooks and on Twitter, HollyNiece, and until we meet again, happy reading.